Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. We're back looking at the G cells, and now it's time to have a look at Germany. Germany has a lot to offer, and is one of the most played sets of tech trees in the game, and there's a reason for that. There's a lot of cool vehicles in there, and a lot of very fun stuff to give a go at. The first set of premiums I feel like are not really required for Germany. Germany actually has a ton of like kind of heavy bombers at the lower BRs, and well, medium bombers, but you know, they're heavy compared to a lot of other nations, and also like light attack aircraft, so generally you can actually get a lot of research done just by playing these. They also have gems like the HE-100, which is super fun, and also the E-1, which in my opinion is one of the best kind of starter aircraft to learn how to play aircraft properly. You know, how to manage energy, how to turn fight, how to do all of these things, because the E1, you can mold yourself to the enemy's weaknesses instead of your strengths, because it's pretty good at everything. The only issue with it is its guns, and as a trainer vehicle, that's fine, because you get to learn how to aim properly, otherwise, you know, you're not going to do any damage. So, for the premiums, at the low tiers, you know, you have Flegels, BF-109A, it's okay, I suppose. It's got a very weak armament, and also the engine isn't exactly the best for it. It's a fine vehicle. You know, I think it overheats a lot if I remember the last time I played it, but it's not really useful. You know, you might as well just play the standard tech tree stuff, and if you're struggling with research, just spade the bombers. You know, you'll get a bunch of RP from these just playing through them. The Libya Ju-87, so this basically just has a big old 1,000 kilo attached to it, so this is fun for ground forces at the low tier, but it's not a vehicle, you know, that's gonna do crazy things in that way. It's just going to have a big old bomb that you can kind of drop on somebody, so if that's something you want to do, then that will work, obviously. Once again, there's standard tech tree equivalents, but if you don't want to grind them out, then, you know, you can use this. It's useful in naval, it's useful in ground. I wouldn't say it's very useful in the air modes, since the Ju-87 really isn't that good, apart from just being a bomb truck. The IL-2 is a little bit better, though. This vehicle is much more multi-role. The 23mm are really good in air realistic, because they can pop stuff like medium tanks and even heavy tanks, so you can kind of deal with a lot of AIs with this vehicle if you're left alone. It doesn't have the turrets like a lot of other IL-2s, so survivability is not as good, but it is a very maneuverable aircraft for how heavy it is. The engine really pulls it around, and it can do a lot of maneuvers that many people don't see coming. It also does get two 250s or 4 50 kilo bombs, which is quite nice on it, and also gets a quite nice set of offensive armaments to be able to deal with stuff. So for me, this one's actually a pretty decent one. You know, I wish it was rank 3 so you could do like tests with it and stuff, but overall I think it's pretty nice to play. The Wellington is, well, a Wellington. It's okay, like the bomb load's good on it, but everything else is pretty weak. No survivability, no speed, pretty weak defensive armaments, overall not a great vehicle. And of course at the same time, it's, you know, can carry pretty decent bomb loads, but if you can't get to the target, then what's the point, you know? There's not really much point in playing through it. Then you got the AK-1B, which is completely fine. You know, I think the BF-109s are way better in general, but the AK-1B is still okay. It still can do a lot of work, so if you like the USSR stuff and you've just moved over to Germany, maybe you can give this one a go and have it, you know, have a bit of fun with it. But it's a very basic vehicle. The BV-238, so this one is what I class as like a chill vehicle. There's a few vehicles like this in the German tech tree, where basically it's just a heavy bomber that gets a really high altitude spawn, so you can use its engines and its power just to get even higher in climb, kind of like the ME-264, and then just kind of bomb bases and air realistic and just chill, you know, and not really worry about anything. Read a book, listen to a podcast, watch a movie, you know, just kind of relax in the BV-238. It does have a really good armament as well, you know, a dual 20mm plus quad 30mm looking behind it, so you can technically defend yourself against a lot of things which move around. It's just leisurely, you know. It's really hard to die in this thing unless somebody really wants to annihilate you. So yeah, it's just a way of destroying bases and just relaxing while grinding our PNSL. The P47 is okay. It's not as good as its old version because it's a Razorback one instead of a bubble one, but it does have the 850 cals. It doesn't get any secondary armaments, so that should be noted. So it's not as good as a lot of the other P47s we've seen in other tech trees because of the fact that it doesn't have that multi-role ability. But in Aerialistic, it's completely fine. Like, it works very well. And also at 3.7, you're getting to kind of the apex of how good the BF-109s are, so you can run it with them and do fantastically. Obviously, in arcade air, it's also very good. The TAR 154 is okay. Once again, very singular rolly with the MK108s and MG151s. Pretty useless in ground, pretty useless in naval, but in aerialistic, it can be pretty good. You know, got good climb rate on it, got good damage on the guns, and is probably one of the better twin-engine fighters in the game. I just wish it had more abilities, you know, I just wish it had a little bit more going for it instead of just the standard stuff that all of the other twin engines have. So for me, that's unfortunate, but I know a lot of people who enjoy it and have a great time in it, so, you know, maybe other people would be enjoying it too. You also have the Focke-Wulf 190A5 U14, so this is more of a recent one they've added in. This should have been in the tech tree, I don't know why it isn't. It's a Focke-Wulf for the torpedo, basically, so it's a little bit more useful in naval forces than any of the other forces that exist, since all it has is 220mm and the standard A5 design. But yeah, it kind of sucks that Germany has limited options for torpedo planes, and one of them is behind a paywall. So I would probably not buy this, just because of the fact that you are basically just purchasing it for a torpedo, and the HE-111 exists, and you can bring 2 torpedoes with that. But yeah, it just kind of sucks that was not a tech tree vehicle. The LA-5FN, once again, if you're a fan of Soviet engineering, it's one to go for. Completely fine plane. You know, I've not really hugely enjoyed the Levechkin series, but I also understand their usefulness. It's just one of those which I know is good, and I know, you know, can be played at a high level. I'm just not too interested in them myself. It can also be useful in ground forces because of this armored target spell, or ground target spell. You can top down a lot of vehicles, take out engine decks and so forth, and then use it as kind of an air superiority fighter, which can work very well for it. Then you got the 219A7. This is basically just a ground pounder. Has the MK103s, which is quite nice, and also the MG151s, the MK108s. If you leave this thing alone, then it's incredibly powerful. You know, it can do a lot of damage to the enemy and can generally do really well. The problem is, most of the time it doesn't get left alone, just like stuff like the Duck, for example. So even though it can clean up a lot of stuff, and also at the same time it's a strike aircraft, so it gets an air spawn and stuff like Aerialistic, it still will just get caught and annihilated. Its defense is very weak, which obviously hampers it quite a lot. The Do 335B2 is a really nice addition in ground especially, but also in naval and even air, because it's just a Do 335 with a ridiculous amount of weaponry. It has 3 MK103s, so the high velocity 30mm from the Germans. It has 2 250s and 1 500. Like, if you're left alone in this, in a ground scenario or in a naval scenario, you can just wreak havoc on PT boats and any coastal vessel, and also in the ground with the 30mm you can pen through basically anything. 77mm worth of pen means that you can make mincemeat out of a lot of vehicles that you face, and if you can't pen them, then you just drop a bomb on them and just kill them that way. This thing is really powerful. Also in Aerialistic, you can hunt bombers, and then you can become a support aircraft to be able to deal with a bunch of other stuff as well. So it's just a really nice vehicle. The main issue is, though, if vehicles catch you, you have pretty much no defense. You can't defensively fly in this thing, you have to rely on your speed, and if you're using it as a bomb truck, or if you're caught out when trying to climb, or when trying to really do anything, you're just going to get annihilated. So it needs that initial air superiority to be able to make a big difference in the game. Then you have the Ju-288C. The Ju-288C is one of the easiest vehicles in the world to play. It has two 1800 kilo bombs. It's basically annihilated the matchmaker around it. All you've got to do is just drop the two bombs on bases, and there you go. You've made a ton of SL and a ton of RP. Wow, really cool. Top marks, thumbs up. And then just read a book for a bit, and then go into the next match and just keep doing it. It's one of the most leisurely experiences you'll run into, and if anybody tries to attack you, it's a super maneuverable aircraft, so you just turn around and hit them with the 20mm that's sat in the back, and also the 13s. So yeah, it's insanely good, has been for a long time, has the really fun DB610 engines, which are two, I believe, 605s welded together, so it has incredible speed past it as well. It's just a really good vehicle, and as I said, it's so good it annihilated the matchmaker around it. Then you got the G91R4. This one, of course, is the one which is the same as the Italian R4, so it's still got its place in the game, still got its place in the meta. It's just not as good as it used to be. Can carry 4S, can carry the AS-20s as well for ground, so multi-role is massively available for this one, and also you get this really interesting camouflage on it, the good old Tiger camouflage, so that's pretty nice. Then you know, you have the AS-20s got nerfed, but they're still powerful, and also with the AIM-9Bs, you just got to understand that you can't really dogfight with this thing, but you can do pretty much anything else that you want in it, set up kills very easily with the missiles, and have a really good time. So overall, still a very powerful vehicle, the G91R4. And that's about it, I think, because the rest are pack vehicles, or of course, unique vehicles for aviation. There is a helicopter on sale for the Germans. It's an Mi-24, the P specifically. The vehicle itself is at 9.7, so unlike a lot of the other G vehicles, it's a little bit lower, and that's probably because it doesn't have thermals. It does have the good old HIRSS, so it's a little bit better against missiles, and of course the IRCM as well, plus the flares and chaff, so survivability is okay on it. It's just maybe looking or seeking targets is a little bit harder. It does have the all-aspect R60 MKs though, to keep it alive, and of course the Sturms, which are definitely the limiting factor to this vehicle, which is why you probably don't see it out too much. The ATGMs aren't great on the vehicle compared to many others which exist, so that's probably the big problem with it. And also, the German tech tree has some really nice, has a really nice starter helicopter in the Alouette. It only gets pretty weak around here, but even the bows, they're not bad. Like the vehicles themselves, they actually have access to hot missiles straight off the bat, which make them a lot easier to use than a lot of other nations. They just don't really have a lot of other uses. And then when you get the UHT, of course you've got the fire and forget PARs, and you can have a lot of fun with those too. You also get the good old hot threes if you feel like using them, but obviously everybody just uses the PARs because, well, fire and forget is pretty strong. So the vehicle itself is okay. It's got a few limiting factors, but if you want to grind through the tech tree, especially in heli PvE, it would be complete. For the ground setup, Germany has a ton of options, which are all really nice. Basically starting off with the Panzer II DAC. This one is just a copy of the standard Panzer II C that you see in the tech tree. The Panzer II DAC plus basically all of the other vehicles are incredibly powerful when it comes to the game, especially when you can laden it like this, which is super easy to do. And then even if you want, you can put like extra stuff on it as well. But yeah, it's an insanely powerful vehicle. because of the 20mm. I've had a few issues with the desync and half the rounds not doing anything, but overall it's pretty nice. These ones are the reason why, you know, low-tier Germany is insanely strong. You can basically just annihilate anything that comes close. It's really, really powerful. Then you have the Fahrzeug, so this is kind of the big kind of land ship that the Germans have. Every nation has some kind of vehicle like this. This one's probably one of the weaker ones. It has the 37mm and the 75mm, which is quite nice, but its armor is very weak. So you can see at parts it literally has 13mm of armor in the middle of it, 15 on the turret, and then 20 is its highest armor. So it's really just not worth it from a survivability point of view to be able to play this vehicle. The other thing is the gun is okay, but its main rounds don't pen as much as you may think because it's low velocity, and the 37 relies on APCR, so that tells you all you need to know. It's a meme vehicle, but if you're looking for a meme vehicle that's a land ship, just pick up the T-35 instead and have a bit more fun. The Panzer IIIN randomly went up in BR more recently, don't know why. I don't think it's a very good vehicle. It's got the low velocity 75 on it, which can do, you know, decent damage, especially with the heat, since it pens 100mm, but it's low velocity and can be quite hard to aim. It's a bog standard Panzer III. Has the extra armor on the front, which is quite nice, and also on the sides of the turret, but usually you can just shoot it through here and it will just die. So the vehicle itself is okay, it's just not really 3.0 worth. I would say if it was a 2.7, then it would be, you know, a lot better. A lot of the other low velocity Donkey 75s, you can see on the Panzer IV is 2.0, and then the standard Panzer IIIJ with the long 50 is actually 2.7, with the 3L, and then even the 3M being at 3.0 and 3.3 with the long 50. The short barreled 75 is really one which is much lower in BR, so I don't know why this is at 3.0 at the moment. Then you got the 15cm PZW42. This is just the truck with a bunch of rockets on the back of it. I mean, I suppose it could be probably fun for somebody. I don't find these vehicles fun, and they're crazy expensive for what they are. So you're basically paying that much for, you know, 20 rockets on a vehicle, and for me, that's not really worth it. You know, a little bit of fun, but way too expensive. There's much better options which are much cheaper. T-34 is always going to be good, always going to be a good standard vehicle to have. So yeah, the vehicle itself also has some decent skins on the market, which is kind of interesting. But the vehicle is fine. It used to be part of an incredibly good lineup, but then everything kind of changed BR. Because it was an incredibly good lineup and was for a very long time, and then they realized that stuff maybe needed a little bit of shifting. But the T-34 747R is completely fine. You know, it's a standard F-34 cannon, standard T-34. The only difference is, of course, the side skirts. Overall, I'd say this is a good vehicle and will work very well. Then you got the KV-2, this just a donkey machine. The KV-2 will never really be meta because of its long reload, but at least it can be fun with the full turrets and also with all that stuff. The cupola is one of the big changes, and the cupola actually provides a weak spot for people to shoot at. The main weak spot, of course, of a KV is here, though. Most guns around this BR will be able to just go straight through this, so yeah, survivability is pretty low for the good old KV. And if you want a machine that just, you know, donks people, though, it can be quite fun, especially with the overpressure changes. You have, of course, the good old concrete shell, I think, which is this one or this one. But you've also got the HE, which also can just blast people, which is really enjoyable when it comes off. So this one's a bit of fun. You can also do all your dailies and stuff in it and specials since it's rank 3. Then you got the Panzer IVJ. Panzer IVJ is different, or this is the Panzer Verfehlswagen J, I should say, so it's got some additional armor on it. Main issue is the turret traverse, 5.9 degrees is really bad. If you compare it to the H, it's at 9.8. The J is even faster with it, so yeah, it's in a bit of a rough position. When it comes to that stuff, it's surprising that it's a rank 3, so at least it's usable for a lot of stuff, but there are better options, and it's just got too many limitations. The gun's good though, the armor's not, and the targeting speed is just not good enough. The Churchill went up in BR, now it's gone down in BR again, so it's sat at 4.0 nowadays. It's fine, you know, it's not as strong as it used to be because they changed the lineup a lot, but this used to be part of like the KV-1B, the T-34, the Churchill lineup, and it was really strong. It still is really strong as a vehicle, but not as strong as it used to be. The 57 is fine. It does a lot of damage, good reload on it, so you can just keep pumping out rounds over and over again, taking out key parts of vehicles because it has good penetration, but the armor of this one just can't really stand up. Like these flat areas nowadays, like it's only 80 or 90 millimeters. Most stuff you'll fight will just be able to go straight through this. Maybe it'll struggle a little bit with this because there's some dodgy armor because you got this plate behind it as well, but most people will just be able to just shoot straight through this. So it's another heavy tank where you can't rely on the armor, which usually is bad for the vehicle. The Brummbars, once again, a bit of fun. A lot of armor on the front of it. So, you know, it has a 100 millimeter flat point here. It has the 150 millimeter, and also once again after the overpressure changes is a lot more fun with the HE shell and also the heat. So this one can really just donk people. It doesn't really do anything else though. So if you're looking for a vehicle to be competitive and meta, this isn't it. But it is some fun, and that to me is important. You know, you every so often need vehicles that you can go back to where you can just kind of have a good time and you can just kind of relax with, and that is this vehicle here. Then you have the KV-1C. This got up yard. It used to be 4.7, used to be a monster, still is pretty good. You know, it's basically a mixture of the Panzer gun with the KV chassis, so very mobile, good armor, and also you got the 75 millimeter. The only issue with this thing is 5.7 Germany and 5.3 Germany are really strong, so you get up to quite a lot, but at the same time there's a lot of different things that you can, you know, do with it and have a bit of fun with. So I think overall it's still a fine vehicle. They also added the VK3002, so you actually have a vehicle to run along with it, and also now the Oswin 2 as well. So generally it does have a lineup, where previously when they put it up in BR it didn't have a lineup, so that kind of made the vehicle not as good, but it's fine. Then you got the Panzerbefehlswagen 6P. This one is an interesting one because it has the extra hull armor on it, so it's got this 100 millimeter plate, and then it's got the 100 behind it as well. So this means that it's a lot more tanky than a lot of other vehicles that people run into. This is good, but has its issues. Does have the cupola, which is massive, which is super easy to pen. Does have really bad targeting speed on the gun, which is a problem. But it does make up for them in different ways. So it's got good mobility forward and backwards, so you can get out of danger pretty quick. And also, at the same time, you can always use bushes and stuff to cover the cupola, and also maybe some more weaker parts of it. At 5.7, it's pretty strong. It's much better than the VK, which was the event vehicle, and you have a really good 5.7 lineup as well with the Panthers and also the Tigers and everything else. So definitely worth a look in that point. Then you've got the Befehlswagen Jagdpanther. So this one's a little bit up and down, in my opinion. Like I don't know whether this is good or bad. It got downbeard more recently because it wasn't very good, and it's whenever I face them, it really depends on what I'm in. Like the major thing about the Jagdpanther, because it doesn't have a turret but it has a pretty powerful gun, you've got to be able to bounce shells off this upper glacis. So if you face vehicles which can't pen this, then you're going to do really well. If you face vehicles that can pen this, then you're going to be completely useless. And I still feel like nowadays, most of the BRs that you face with this thing can still pen this upper glacis, so still is a little bit rough. It does look really nice though, and they did a really good job with the good old 3D effects on it. It does look like a beautiful vehicle. The RU-251 is also about, they moved this thing up to 7.0. it's still very powerful. Like, it's still very good, and it fills its role very good. The main issue that people have with this thing is the fact that it's 90mm, doesn't do as much damage as other vehicles do around these BRs, and that's fine, but it's a light tank, it's mobile, it can flank, it has artillery, it can scout, it can be used more instead of like a one-to-one aggressive role, you can use it as a support vehicle for your team and overall do very well. So the vehicle for me is good, it's still very good, it just needs a slightly different playstyle to be played with. The major issue with it is there isn't a ton of other 7.0s apart from the Weasel and the Kugel Blitz, and I believe there's an Arado that's 7.3 nowadays, but you do have the Horton you can run it with, which should be quite fun. So it still has a lineup, it's just not as powerful as it once was. You then have the Patton 2 at 7.3. It's a solid vehicle. They added the gun depression to it, which is really nice. And also, obviously, because it's a premium, you get everything spaded, which is good. And that means you don't have to grind out the heat to make the Patton 2 actually a useful experience. So you have the heat FS sorted, and also all of the other rounds. It's a bog standard good MBT. It's going to work well. It's got okay armor, it's got a decent gun. It would be nice if it was the 105, but the 90 still works fine. The major issue with this thing is the competition it has. You got the Marder 1, the BMP 1, the M48, the Leopard 1, all at 7.3 nowadays. It's an absolute powerhouse of a lineup. Do you fit the Patton to in there? That's the real question you got to ask yourself. Does a vehicle which is pretty bog standard in the trees that it's in, do you stick that in above an M48? And I think most people's answers is no. The last vehicle is the TAM2 IP. This one is good. It's got the 105 on it, which is really nice. It also gets access to the M33 at 8.7, one of the most powerful rounds at 8.7 that it gets. It doesn't get thermals, that's why it's 8.7, but it does get everything else. Scouting, laser, artillery, mobility, all of that stuff. It does get extra armor as well, which can ricochet shots, weirdly enough, so overall it's not too bad, and generally it does pretty well. Then you also have the first stage ammo stowage on it, which is pretty cool, which turns up. So overall, not too bad. I think the vehicle overall has a good playstyle, and also now that the meta's more 9087 orientated because they moved up a lot of the high tier stuff, it actually has a much better time than it did previously, and so that's really nice. You can also run it with the standard TAM and the Leopard A1A1 and just have a really good lineup around it, even with the G91s, which are also at 8.7. So pretty nice vehicle to have in a lot of different lineups. For Naval, there's not actually a ton of offerings for Germany. You have a few blue water ones and a few coastal ones, but really not a ton. The first one is the Lux. This is the Raub tier class. It has the 3 single 127s, similar to, of course, the Leopard. It is kind of the combo one. I've never really liked the early destroyers for the Germans. It took a long time to kind of get through them, so maybe something like the Lux might be worth a go at, since there aren't that many options which are around. It just has 3 127s on it, 2 single 20s, and also some torpedoes. Nothing too fancy, nothing too flashy. Does of course have the camos, which is quite nice, but nothing too nuts on it. Just a little bit of fun on the vehicle. Then you have, of course, the Z47, which is more recent, so it wasn't discounted. But the Cars rule is now. I've been playing quite a lot of Germany Naval. I spaded the Leipzig, I spaded the Emden, I spaded the Elbing, and I cannot tell the difference, really, between, like, the Leipzig, the Köln, and also the Nuremberg, right? Especially the Nuremberg and the Leipzig. They seem basically the same, just slightly different armor on them, but they have, the same main guns and the same main setup. This one obviously has a lot more secondaries, and the Kern has more armor, So the Carl's rule is kind of like a middle between like all of them, where it has like, I suppose, similar armor to the K class of the Kern, but it has different guns. It has some 105s on it, and I just don't really understand why this thing's 5.7. Because the 150s are nice. Like I've been using them at 5.3. They're super powerful. You know, very good fire rates overall. Pretty good. That's been quite nice to use. You know, 8 rounds per minute, and also, you know, a lot of damage. You also have these 105s, which are nice, and then 37s, then 20s, and, you know, pretty weak torpedoes, which is fine. But at the same time, it's the same BR as the Eugen, which has 4 dual sets of 203s, which have a pretty decent fire rate when you take into account how many there are. It has 6 dual 105s, 18 40mm, 6 quad 20s, and then some 20mm and a bunch of torpedoes, plus more armor, plus more crew, plus more survivability. So why would you ever play this? Like, what is the advantage of this over this? I suppose it's a slightly smaller target. I mean, okay. But yeah, it's a no-brainer to me when it comes to this stuff. Then you got the coastal tree. So you got the KM5. This one is on offer. I don't really like it. It's only got a 15 and also a 7.92mm and torpedoes. If you want to pick this up, it's also available in the Warbond shop. But if I'm honest with you, it just doesn't seem very good. Like just 115 and a couple 7.62s. I'd like a bit more firepower, and it's also 1.7. There's a lot of 1.3s that have way more firepower than this thing, and much more useful. The LS4 is also on offer. This is the standard kind of reserve premium, has a 20mm instead of a 15, so technically it'll probably be slightly better than the 15, but nothing too crazy. So for me, it's just a little bit of fun, but Germany has a decent amount of quite good vehicles around this BR. I don't really think premiums are needed. The VS8 is really cool. It's a mine layer with a bunch of mines on it. The contact mines, which are nice, but at the same time, it has its issues. The main issues are the guns. The 15mm, you may think, oh, well, there's 4 of them, that's pretty good. It's a 2.7, which means there's vehicles with ridiculous amounts of more firepower than this thing. And also, in order to get all of them on target, well, you can't really, basically only if you're like shooting upwards. If you're looking behind you, you can get 3 on target. If you're looking in front, you can only really get 1, maybe 2 on target. So the firing angles are just really bad on the 15s, and the mines are nice, but, you know, there are a lot of vehicles where they have mines, and mines, you need to have a initial advantage to be able to plant a bunch of mines, and the VS8 doesn't give you that. Then you got the M802. M802 is still very powerful, not as powerful as it used to be because of matchmaking changes and also other changes, but it's still good. You know, it can still donk on PT boats, it can still donk on a lot of other things, has some nice 37s and 20s on it, and also torpedoes, but the main thing is the 105s, you know, taking out PT boats with these things. Once you run into destroyers, you'll obviously get clapped, but it still gets the PT boat spawn, so it can still do pretty well in that regard. So I still think it's a good pickup. It's just they raised its BR finally, so it does actually face stiffer competition, and you don't see it as much. Nowadays, people usually go more for the SKR7 than this thing, so it can still rule the waves because of its BR, but not as powerful as it used to be. Generally, it's better just to grind through the tech tree. You know, Germany has a lot of pretty fun coastal things. There's only a few dark spots like the VS10, which is not great, but all the rest are pretty fun. That's Germany, ton of different stuff. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Millie Draper, Juan the Panda, Nick R. Kupila, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Merciless Reaper, Orange Tail, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Moxie B. Young, Peter Grayling, Jerry Provolt, Bareen, Alan Hacker, Sem Arslan, Uncle Bean, Derek R., and Lafouche for supporting the channel.